Stephanie and Cameron and everybody for allowing us to come back here. Step in the right direction. So, that being said, respecting his time, we'll let him get started, give us kind of an update on, I guess, what's going to constitute maybe kind of the final draft, before the final draft of the MAAR and the changes that have been made in advance of the public hearings, which I think are scheduled for, what, about 2.5 weeks or so?
February the 25th.
Okay. All right, so
Yeah.
we'll turn it over to you, Casey.
Thanks. And it's, you know, I can get interrupted and take questions at any time. I've got a couple of things that I wanted to cover just to kind of lay a little background and groundwork for it, to catch y'all up to speed. So, you know, I know most of y'all have been following this along the way for the past few years. And, you know, so to catch up, there's not much that's changed in version 4 from what came out in version 3 in March 2020. I think a lot of the delay was just COVID related or whatever related, but they didn't exactly spend all that time making edits to the document. So if you were kind of up to speed on what was going on in version 3, you're pretty much still up to speed, and I'll round it out. If you're not familiar with where we were in version 3, it was a big change from what the original plan was. We're still, the plan now, the plan for version 3 was don't rezone anything. All the B3 properties still going to be B3, all the R1 properties still R1, all the whatever property is still the same whatever. They're not changing anybody's zoning. They're adding a couple of new zoning districts, but nothing is being zoned that, you know, those districts now. They're just available for you to rezone into. So everything's staying the same on the zoning map. If you were a PUD before, you're still the same PUD. You know, if you were B2 but limited to no whatever car washes, you're still B2 and no car wash. None of those special kind of nuggets that are buried in the rezoning ordinance are going away. Those are going to survive all of this transition. But just because you're still B3, it's not the same rules as it was before. They've changed the use table. They've changed the design criteria for what new construction needs to look like in these districts, in most of the districts. And they've changed the approval process and the process to change from one thing to another or to get additional approvals. And that's the way it was in version 3, and they've made some tweaks around the edges to some of that in version 4. But generally the use table, and a lot of people, this is their first question, well, can still B3, but can I still do whatever, you know, I was doing before? Generally on the use table, if you could do it today in your district, you'll be able to do it under the new code in that same district. They don't get more restrictive on uses. If anything, they've opened up some districts to additional uses that they weren't allowed to have before. But it had created this new category of condition, you know, uses by right, conditional uses, special exceptions, you know, and then it's prohibited, so you need a variance to do it. We used to not have the special exception category. It's supposed to be a little bit easier of a step to get something than the conditional use. This was a change we asked for in an earlier, I think from version 1 to 2 or from 2 to 3, they made that change. But they've condensed the use table down from however many 80 pages it is right now down to about 12 or so. So it's not, it doesn't appear in the use table the same way, but as best I can tell, all those uses are still there. Now there's some exceptions for big utility companies and some other things where they ratcheted them down, but for y'all's purposes, it's generally the same uses in the same districts. Anyone have any questions on that issue? Because I know that's a big one that a lot of people just want to get their head around before they move on.
Where does, so conditional goes where, special exception goes where does that, who addresses who?
Yeah, it's different ways of getting to the same place. And there's a chapter, and this is where it gets really, this is where the code does not live up to maybe the vision of let's make it more user-friendly and more predictable and more easy to administer for the city and easy for the public and the community to operate under it. There's a lot of bureaucracy to it, but it's rezonings, conditional uses, special exceptions, all these things are going to go through the planning commission and the city council and the neighborhood meeting for several of them. Variances still go to the zoning board of adjustment and appeals. The criteria, and they don't do a good job of this, and it's one of the criticisms I have of it, the criteria for getting the special exception is a little easier than a conditional use. But the path forward takes just as long and it's just as hard. You know, the road, if you've got an objectionable use you're trying to put in. And it's going to get to a political decision at city council level.
Why do I think special exceptions are going to BZA to that?
Let me,
ask this.
And
What's an example of a special exception?
Well,
I want to say it right now. Any guys to
okay, yeah, sorry.
plan commission approval.
I was looking at my page on conditional use. Special exceptions, they're going to go to the BZA. There's a hearing.
because that doesn't appeal to council, so that wouldn't go to.
That appeals outside. Decision. Bless you. Yeah, it's, it follows the variance process. So it'll go to BZA, and if somebody's aggrieved, whether it's the applicant or the neighbor or whoever, the appeal is to court, to circuit court. And then the circuit court, you could have a jury trial where they sit sort of as a board of zoning adjustment and they render a decision on whether to give it or not give it. It's I suggested creating a model to do it. I had a totally different procedure in mind of how to administer it. It's supposed to be used as a way to say, well, we should let car washes or we should let drive-throughs be in this district, but sometimes you might need to add a condition like a buffer or a different thing to deal with some localized issue that's not a citywide maybe, thing that you could cover in the thing. But they didn't want any administrative type control over it. They wanted to go to one of the bodies, one of the boards. And so it's going to BZA. And so BZA will get a little bit busier than they currently are. The appellate review path, variances in BZA, in special exceptions, going to court may not sound like a great idea for a lot of y'all. It may just sound like it's lawyer money, but it does get it out of the political realm. And it keeps it from going to city council. And so while you or a neighbor might want to pursue it, or the city itself could challenge a variance that's granted by the BZA, you may see some, increased traffic to try to push things, through that venue. If you know it's going to get challenged by either you if you're denied or somebody else if it's granted, you've got some remedy, way down the road, but you've got some remedy that gets it out of the political realm. When you go to the city council for a rezoning and it's denied or it's granted and somebody wants to challenge it, and then you go to court to challenge the city council's decision, the court reviews that with a lot of deference. These are legislative decisions and, judges just aren't going to normally wade in to telling the city how to handle things on a legislative matter any more than they're going to say 3% is too high of a tax rate, it should be 2%. I mean, it wades into too much of a legislative issue. So when you are looking down the road at doing something that's likely to go the distance, a lot of times you want to push it through the BZA path to try to create an avenue to get relief.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Before you move on. On the use table, you said it's gone from, let's say, 80 pages to 12. It's going to be much more general. You're not going to be able to look up a specific use and tell a prospect, you can come in my building or you can't, based on what you do. Hopefully you'll be able to look at that and interpret it, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of gray area there where somebody says, where you're going to have to say, I don't know whether you can come into my building or not.
It's much more general, but the old code, I mean, they would be like retail sales of candles, okay. But I mean, retail sales of pet food. I mean, it was very specific. I mean, it was almost anecdotally specific. And so you're going to run into some of these questions of, I don't know if it's a this or a this. This is allowed, this isn't allowed. And you're going to be writing letters to the Mobile department saying, I need a zoning determination. This is what my proposed use is it allowed in this district? And I would imagine until.
So that's going to be up to somebody downtown is going to say, well, I don't think so.
We need to make sure to say the right thing.
Yeah, but that's the way it is currently, but you do have a more specific use table. But if there's a use that's not listed, or if it's, not clear, and you want to make a decision, or you need to get an answer, you have to just ask the person downtown that's going to be reviewing the building permit or the business license or whatever, saying, this is what these people intend to do, is this allowed in this district? And they'll make a decision, and if you don't like their decision, you can go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment Appeals as an appeal of a zoning determination.
So once that decision is made, is it going to apply across the board in every zone? I mean, my building going to be treated the same as Terry's building?
Well,
Depending on the location? You don't know how much you pay.
You know.
Where do we pay? Chicago.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Will we be setting precedents that says, okay, I've got a bakery, and they're gonna actually bake on site? And right now, I'm not sure whether that goes into B1 or B2, but you can look it up and it'll say, B2 by right, B3 by permission. And then without that, you're gonna go to them and they're gonna say, you can go in a B2. Now, is that gonna set a precedent across the board?
It will have, I'll say this, it should. If they take an inconsistent position with the second bakery and you go challenge their decision to the Zoning Board of Adjustment Appeals saying, well, you let this guy do it over here on Smith Street, why can't this guy do it over here on Jones Street? You'd like to think the zoning board's going to hold the city to some consistency, but it's and if you have enough of these, as we live under this code, they're probably saying, we get this question just about every other month. Let's just add it to the table of uses. Let's just call it what we've been doing. It's clearly a gap in our code. Let's just say what we're doing, put it in there. And hopefully they would, as they get enough volume of a particular request, just say, and then people don't have to write a letter or call us or not know what the deal is, just put it in there. But it's, this is more of a modern length of table of uses. We had a crazy one that we're operating under right now. I mean, it's it's a zoo. And so I don't, I can't fault the city for trying to cram it down into more general categories, and deal with it a little bit differently. I don't think it's the city trying to be vague or everything's got to come through us to get approval kind of thing. I just think they're trying to come up with a more modern version of a use table.
Casey, Tommy, Prater, good morning.
Hey.
I think for those of us, well, it's more gray hair people on here than not, but for those of us who've been around a long time, that crazy table of uses have come from years of why isn't this here and why are we having to fight the battle to get a bakery in what is obviously a bakery slot? And I'm using Joey's example as a thing. And I think this group's angst is, over now someone at City Hall has the opportunity to say bakery works, and again, I'm just using that as an example. This bakery works, and we have to, we're now again at somebody's discretion at City Hall versus, well, I realize this table was so massive, we could at least put our head on the pillow at night knowing that this could be used without having to go to City Hall to get approval to do that.
It has those advantages, but it's, I think the way the city currently operates and the way we're gonna operate under a new code based on this, you're gonna have to interact with the city. I mean, I had a call last week from somebody said, I just bought this industrial property and I had no idea that there was this special zoning that applied to it. And it was when it was rezoned, to add some additional land to it, it came with condition, and he's like, I had no idea. And the previous owner hadn't done any of those conditions. And now he's got a municipal offense ticket, and he hadn't done a thing. I mean, he hadn't changed anything out there. He's got a zoning violation. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to know. You got to go get the actual rezoning ordinance, not the map and not the code, but the ordinance to figure out what the rules are. He's like, well, yeah, how am I gonna know that? I was like, I don't know, you just have to do it on every property, everywhere. You have no way of knowing if there's something buried in the ordinance somewhere that you've got to do. And so even if you saw, and just to carry the example forward, bakery, B2, look at the map, B2, we can do a bakery here, right? Well, maybe, but you might find in that ordinance that you can only do whatever, a bank and a drugstore on that district, or everything but a bakery. And so that world, which I very much don't agree with and I don't like, it's not good planning and zoning as a citywide matter, it is not going away. I mean, you're gonna end up with those ordinances laying around like landmines. You're gonna have neighborhood overlays. We'll get to that in a minute. You have your use table that may be a little more general, a little more uncertain. I think the protocol is gonna be to, and this is where I get to, it's gonna be a hard to administer world for the city staff, because they're gonna be getting a zoning verification or zoning confirmation request from all y'all every day about something, or from a prospective buyer, or from a prospective tenant, or from a lawyer that's trying to do something to put something together. They're going to have to go to the code, to the overlay, to the whatever flood maps, to the actual ordinance that last rezoned it, or the ordinance that created the PUD, and digest all of that down to get to whatever it is the answer is. But they're the only ones that have half this stuff. I mean, you can get the code and the map, but if you don't have the ordinance, you would have no way to even know when it was last rezoned, unless it happened in your memory or in your owner's memory. And so it's going to require a lot of communication and interaction with the city. I think it already does. And so it's just going to be one more reason to go through that process going forward.
Casey, are you saying if I buy a piece of property that's currently vacant, but zone B3, there could be overlays on the B3 zoning so that I can't use it for a bakery because they took it out and they gave it to B3 zoning. They said, yeah, you can be B3, but you can't have bakeries.
Absolutely.
And I have no way of knowing that at the time I buy it without hiring a sophisticated lawyer who can figure out whether or not there was some granting, when it was zoned, granting it with subject to exceptions.
You could, and if you wrote the city and said, I need a zoning verification on 12 Smith Street, looking at buying this vacant B3 property, and they say B3, you know, that still doesn't answer the question. You need the ordinance. You need the ordinance that zoned it that. And that's what I'm saying. It's,
What do you, how do you word the letter to say a zoning verification,
It's-
any and all relevant?
it's a public record request. I need a zoning verification letter and I need a copy of the ordinance that zoned it that. And but the people down there, when you go, your tenant or you go fill a building permit to build a, whatever, fast food restaurant, they're gonna do a zoning check, and what they're not just gonna look at the map and the code, they're gonna look at the ordinance, because
Are the ordinances recorded? Can we find them?
no.
No.
So,
Great question, and no, and the map doesn't say B3 with an asterisk, meaning there is an ordinance that you need to find. The map doesn't even show if
You
there's a
don't even
fund.
know that you need that at the time you buy the vacant property until your tenant comes along.
Guess what? Step number D.
Casey, let me ask you, so I know a lot of other, but it sounds like there's gonna be a lot more requests, confirmation, kind of putting burden to verify uses and things like that on the city through these verification letters. A lot of other municipalities, counties, whatever, they charge for that. It's just the city talking about implementing a zoning determination fee.
It doesn't say anything here about that. I've seen it both ways where they charge, you know, a fee, and I've gotten them for free sometimes.
Right.
You know, I don't know that there's a great,
Take the zoning letter, man.
What's that?
You have to pay for a zoning letter, man. It's not much, it's $10.
Oh, I mean, I've seen
you
somewhere.
pay for a zoning letter, but I've been able to say, hey, can you send me the ordinance that did this? And sometimes it just gets emailed back and it's no big deal. Sometimes that's a public record request and you've got to pay.
What kind of turnaround are they talking about on this? I mean,
They're not talking about any turnaround.
Florida, they're
they're
like
like 200
$200.
grand on business licenses right now.
Yeah.
They may have to.
I'm saying,
Handle all these.
that's not really an issue that's addressed in the code. That's just a practical issue that we currently live under,
So we
that's going
got
to
that now.
continue.
You're not just finding surprises when you get to a piece of property. We have that right now.
No, you have that right now
Yeah,
today.
that's not changed. That's not new.
That's not, but now, what I was hoping, that was some legacy of having a bad code, that they had to customize your rezoning to make it right for you and for the neighborhood and all that. And with a modern code, you'd have better clarity. You wouldn't need to customize your rezoning ordinances every time. You just, somebody wants to do B3, city council agrees, it's B3, period. You know, you don't have to say B3, but save this tree in the back southwest corner. There's a tree ordinance for trees. You don't have to say B3, but no truck deliveries after 8 at night, you know, or whatever. You know, maybe that's already addressed somewhere else, but
What's the political quotient of?
that's the political quotient of getting a deal through, and it's, you have to play the game right now because that's how they want it played. So the application that, you know, was going to the planning commission yesterday on the rezoning, I had 15 or 16 uses that would have been allowed in the district I was asking for, but we were voluntarily restricting from ever using it for. But we were trying to put B5 and an R1, and, you know, we were never gonna get there just saying we want the full suite of uses, even though we don't plan to put it to that. But it's gonna require we're not solving that problem. We're not creating it, we're not solving it either. And I think adding, hey, I've got some uncertainty about the use table, can I put a bakery in? That's just gonna be one of several questions you're gonna be asking on the front end before you buy it, or on the front end before you sign your lease, if you already own it. And it's just gonna require some review. And I would think there's gonna need to be, you know, you'd think with better technology, better, you know, big data kind of technology, that one day this would be accessible. But right now, the only way to get these ordinances is to ask the people down at the city, can you give me the ordinance? And sometimes I've asked, and they say, it was never really rezoned. It's been this since 65, the big map. So there's no goofy little ordinance that goes with it that adds some different stuff. That's great. You've got kind of a legacy, you know, or whatever, a founding fathers zoning district without any new rules to it. But just about every other one I've seen, I mean, there's usually some little nugget buried in there that you've got to deal with. And, you know, I would like to think we could get rid of that. That was one of my initial, you know, things with Mark White. And, you know, but apparently this code actually emboldens it or contemplates it, that, you know, conditions can be attached to any of these approvals by the zoning board, by the city council. And you know that they are attaching them, and they're going to continue to. And I think if you could capture all those conditions to where, not that they all show up on the zoning map, but the zoning map would highlight, hey, there's some special rules for this one, city ordinance number blank, blank, blank. You know, there's a database for them, it'd be great. But they don't even show you on the zoning map what's a PUD. I mean, you might think you're B3, you're a PUD, you know, and you wouldn't know it unless you asked somebody down there, what, am I in a PUD? I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but I mean, you may not know. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of communication. I think they're going to start to get swamped with things as people get better and more prolific at asking these things. Because it's a risk to do it. And the guy that I was talking about that bought the industrial property, I mean, he had no idea he was buying into a zoning violation. You know, but here he is, he now owns it, and he's got a municipal offense ticket because there's a condition on his rezoning, his predecessor's rezoning that never got met. He's got a lease, he's got a site that's, you know, fully in use, and he's got a municipal offense ticket. I mean, what, you know, he had no idea. And I can segue here on and again, I'm just trying to share with y'all what's going on with the code. I don't know what the direction is or what what y'all as a group would like to do or aim for with this, but you know, the city has stopped making big changes. You know, they made a big change from version 2 to version 3, you know, where they were rezoning everything in the city, and now they're not rezoning anyway. They made tiny little changes to version 4, and it's going to the planning commission. The city council has hired its own lawyer. That person, Wanda Cochran, is reviewing this. She's going to have some edits. I understand some city council members have reviewed this, and there's some other edits we might expect at the city council level. And that all is to say that I think the hearing at the planning commission is going to be compliant with Alabama law, but not very engaging in, not very likely to lead to substantive changes to the code. Because I think the planning commission is just a recommending body on this. If they see all these other hands where it's about to go, they're out to deal with it more. You know, you might just see them do the hearing, somebody will move to approve it, and move on.
I mean, that brings up a question. I mean, I've got a short list of just things that don't make any sense. And, you know, Margaret's been responding like, you should comment in the portal. And I'm like, I don't know if I feel comfortable just commenting in the portal about some crazy errors, you know?
Yeah, the commenting in the portal, you know, they did actually post most of the comments that I was aware of and respond to them with this draft. You know, they didn't do that for the last one.
And they get kudos for that. I mean, that's.
No, because these weren't all attaboys, great job, you know, you're doing good work down there. type
Most
comments.
did say changes none.
Changes none, but they let you see what other people said and, you know, and then they responded to it, changes none for most of them. But yeah, it's, I don't know. There's 100 ways you could try to do one of these things and roll out the version and get comments and incorporate them. But the way they've chosen to do it is we don't want to have a lot of backroom meetings and other things. Everything's got to be public. You want to comment, you comment on the portal. We might publish that to the world, you know, and we'll incorporate your thoughts.
So they're gonna make, I mean, if there are changes to be made, are they gonna have them after the planning commission, are they gonna have them? Is it gonna go to the council and then changes made and then back to the council?
No, what I understand from talking with some city people is this version 4, regardless of what comments I make, you make, anybody makes, this version of version 4 is going to the planning commission on February 25th.
Which need to fix version 4.
But if somebody comments and says, you know, this doesn't make sense, you can have this here, but not this, and that's it's a lesser district, not a higher one, you got the R in the wrong cell, no one's gonna make that change to version 4 without the planning commission or the city council making that change. The staff, as I understand it, is done editing the document.
I mean, for storage, they want 1 per 1,500 square foot. If you build a modern storage facility, you can have 67, 100,000 square feet, you can have 67 parking places, which makes no sense. And even Margaret acknowledges that. You know, where does that change get implemented? After the planning commission?
Yeah, what will happen, and nobody asks me what they should do. I'm just saying, what I think is gonna happen is this version of version 4 is not gonna get updated or edited, even if there's a typo, before it goes to the planning commission on February the 25th. Planning commission will hold public hearings. All the comments that are logged onto the Map for Mobile portal will be, put in the record of the planning commission's public hearing thing. People will get to speak. And if the planning commission says, move to, recommend approval of the zoning code to city council, period, second, all in favor, aye, then that version of version 4 goes. If they say, move to recommend approval, but change section 6.4.2.1 from 1.5 to 0.5 for the parking ratio, then that edit will be part of their recommendation. But no matter what happens thereafter, the city council can change all of it, none of it. It doesn't have to match what the planning commission approved in any way. They can throw section 64 in the trash can and write an entirely new one between planning commission and city council. The only requirement is that they can't adopt the code without it being published. It doesn't have to be what was published in public hearing at the planning commission level, but they've got to, they've got to get it current, to be version 5, if they make some edits, and they'll publish it. They'll have their, first meeting, second meeting, and all that, to get it adopted.
So they'll still have, if they make any changes, they'll have to have more meetings.
they'll have to have two meetings even without making changes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they'll go through two readings, but and again, I don't know what the appetite on the city council is for how many hearings they want to have and how much they want to spend, on this issue, but they could, if they go forward with version 4 and advertise it for a public hearing and then make substantial changes. But I mean, a lot of things could be substantial, in this context. They're supposed to publish that new ordinance back up and have first reading, second reading. And this is where it's, there's no published timeline for when all that'll happen, because the staff, all they know is that they're on the planning commission agenda for February 25. The planning commission could hold this thing up with public hearings and no votes indefinitely. It's out of the staff's control to some extent, and so no one knows, okay, if we're here on February 25th, on April the 3rd, we're gonna be at our city council, public hearing meeting. We don't know. I think until it gets out of the planning commission, you don't have any ability to start to estimate when the city council is gonna tackle it or how they'll tackle it.
Do we as a group have like a collective list of concerns, or are we just kind of going at it individually? I mean, I know you said, well, I've got it for you.
I was on a bunch of beginning from the zoning, from the table uses, and I spent my time with Casey, what our concern is.
Yeah, it's hard to get your arms around it compared to version 2 and version 1 that just jumped off the page. There's a lot of things that are going to change how you operate and do business and interact with your tenants and customers and clients. By not rezoning everybody's land, I think the city's tried to calm down, the opposition. People aren't as afraid of the document, as they might have been initially. To me, it's less of a change from what they were aiming for. I don't think it solves some of the current problems, that a lot of people, including me, have with the current code. I think it makes some things a little worse. And so you wonder, is it an improvement or not? And I think for residential, it's probably not really much of a change. For people developing subdivisions and doing residential developments. For people operating in downtown, it's essentially no change. They just adopt almost verbatim the current downtown code. For people that live in Africatown, Spring Hill, and Peninsula, it'll be a pretty big change because of the neighborhood overlays in those areas. And it's just a little bit of a mixed bag. I think if you're counting winners and losers on this one, if you've got industrial property that's already built up, it's going to be harder for new stuff to come online to compete because the design criteria you have to build into your warehouses with new construction. It's one of those things where it's kind of a mixed bag. I think, big picture wise, the biggest problems I have as a land use lawyer is this code does not connect hardly at all with the comprehensive plan. The map for Mobile, the future land use map, and the future land use plan. Y'all know there's sort of corridors and neighborhoods and different rules here and there and wherever. All that's gone, but that plan is still the guiding document for whether you rezone this property from B1 to B2. Like, well, I don't know, it's neighborhood traditional, on the comprehensive plan. I don't know what that means, and it's going to give essentially you're gonna get into the exact same world we are today, where our comprehensive, plan says one thing, and our code is something completely different. And that's what version 4 is gonna say, the same districts that we currently have. And you're not gonna have any real touchstone for whether you should or shouldn't rezone property, which means every rezoning decision is gonna be sort of ad hoc, anecdotal, political, the subject of, whatever you can negotiate with the not in my backyard component to whatever it is, if any, and your local council representative. And I just think that does lead to inconsistencies. This guy tried to go from this to this and he got it. This guy tried to go from that to the same thing, he didn't get it. Why? I don't know. But it leads to less certainty, more wasted costs, to try to get some things done that don't get done, that maybe you thought you had a really good shot at getting done. And, and I know that we've had this current code for a long time, and our old comprehensive plan was way older, and the code disconnected from it. You'd think with a new code, we're fixing it, we're connecting the two. We're getting a plan and a code that works with the plan to where you go in and say, well, I'm B2 now and I want to be B3. And here's the plan that says what the vision of the city is for that area, and it either complies or it doesn't. But that plan is talking about this neighborhood and corridor world that we're not in anymore. And so, I've got some bigger picture issues because I felt like we had an opportunity to solve some issues. I don't want to have to get hired to go do a rezoning. I mean, you shouldn't need a lawyer to know what the zoning is for your property. It's not my goal to make it less easy to use. And I feel like there's an opportunity lost here. But the problem is nobody seems to have an appetite to going back and spending the money to get a new comprehensive plan that lines up with what they want the zoning code to now say. So I think the plan is whatever the plan is, and it's not going to get fixed. And the code is going off back kind of in the same direction where our current code is on uses. And so it's, there's no small, easy fix to that. And certainly not at this point. There are little things you could probably tweak along around the edges, parking ratios, not penalizing over parking. On parking, a lot of places, the parking minimums went down. And if you have anything more than the minimum, you've got to make it an alternative surface and get that approved and do whatever. So you can't pave or asphalt your parking that's in excess of the minimum.
I think gravel is acceptable. Which is, I'm very scared of that, but I'm also like, I don't know if that should be.
But I just think there's some little things like that I think you could probably try to tweak and touch in this ordinance as it goes through, but I don't know that we're going to get those big picture changes to connect the plan to the code or.
So I'm reading a lot, there's a lot to me that if you just look at like the rangeland corridor, a couple things are, you build a 10,000 square foot building, you got to put bicycle parking for 2 bicycles, and it goes up from there. And your sidewalk has to connect to the street side, the building must connect to the street side sidewalk. And I look at like, Bay Steel, that Todd Acres, in the new code, would they have to pour sidewalk from way back in the back of that lot? And that building's however many square feet, and they had to put, I guess, and maybe because of the zoning, that would be the bicycle thing, but it's like, I feel like there should be a suburban criteria and a urban criteria. And a suburban warehouse should not have to have all these architectural features or bicycle racks. We don't want encourage people riding bicycles down Rangeline Road.
Well, and
Talk to the bicycle people, they do.
They do anyway, yeah.
well, they're not going to be on the sidewalk though. They're going to be on the road. Yeah, and that's one of the things, I think particularly for office warehouse and industrial type, industrial property doesn't need to meet a lot of the architectural features, but commercial, including warehousing and, office warehouse type things do. And they have to meet essentially the same design criteria if you were building an apartment building, or something else. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, particularly if you're talking about an area that's not like a gateway in or out of the city, or a gateway area that a lot of people see other than the local, businesses. But those are little things that I think you can work comments in, and the little things add up to big things. But I think if the group has kind of, some things that they want to push for, the city is looking for y'all to get on board. The city wants
Are you
support.
saying, taking his example, you want to build a VA hospital down there in Tillman's Corner, and the ordinance will require bicycle racks and access for sidewalks and so on for an area like that. Are you saying this group should be making recommendations to tweak that requirement? And if so, how do we envision all the possibilities of absurdity that there are? And how do we express a desire to say, well, in some cases, Rangeline Road may not be an appropriate place to require bicycle racks. From Mike Pugh's office down there on Higgins Road. I mean,
I'm
how
not,
do you write that? How would we envision that? It would take
You have to contemplate every
decades of
development
time.
scenario.
no, I'm not saying that you're gonna get 100% of it, but if you're aware of something like parking or like bike racks or like something else that affects your property, or it pops in your head, is this is a, it's a cost without a benefit, or it's unnecessary, or it's detrimental, to it. I do think there is a appetite at some with the city to, okay, we make those changes, you're gonna jump on board, or you're gonna be okay with it, or you're not gonna object to it, or you're not gonna try to kill it. And I'm not saying you're gonna get all of it figured out. I can't get it figured out either, because I don't know, whether a bike use out in one area is appropriate or not appropriate. I just know that the city wants to see bike racks all over the place, and, but the city's not building wider roads. They're not talking about doing their part on this. It's just all about your property. We were, with the Midtown Publix, we were supposed to put in a bike path sidewalk along Old Shell Road. It was going to connect to just an oak tree. There's nothing, you weren't going to get anywhere. It doesn't connect, and it's never going to, unless they're going to rip out a bunch of stuff.
Unless the city does.
And the city does something.
Which they're never gonna.
And a sidewalk, everybody's had to build sidewalks that don't connect to other sidewalks, but in theory, they'll get there and you could get some benefit out of it. But no one's gonna ride a bike 100 yards, turn around and ride it back, and turn around and ride it back. And, so there's some of that stuff that may not be earth shattering or stop the world from spinning around, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Isn't there, but the version 4 has an urban and suburban classification.
It does for, it does.
And I think when I put my thoughts down to submit them, I'm gonna try to make an argument that some of these bicycle racks need to be limited to the urban setting, such as the Midtown Publix, but maybe not the one on, wherever, and so that's the only way I know to do it, is to try to offer, you can't just say no bicycle racks. You have to offer, I think you have to offer a logical solution, and then we'll adopt it.
And I think there are, and I agree. I think if you just say, I think this affinity for bicycles is misplaced, you should just delete all that. It's, comment received, changes none.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of previous.
But also the design standard on office warehouse, I'm gonna push for, I think that's okay some places, but not everywhere.
And that's, the design criteria requires certain architectural features, to the site frontage, to the height of the building, to the facade wall, to have some projections or offsets. It's gonna add to the construction cost of new construction, where it's probably adding to the cost without a whole lot of benefit is new construction of warehouses that aren't in gateway areas of the city. I mean, you can drive around Nashville and talk about how great all this is, but they've got other areas that are just plain Jane metal building warehouses, because you need that stuff. You don't need to make them all parapet roofs and offsets and projections on the facade wall. No one needs that there. It's not a gateway area. It's not where the tourists are. It's not where it needs to be cutesy, but the solution here is more universal, and that's one that's not tied to urban and suburban. That building design criteria is citywide. There are urban and suburban areas, and they really affect percentage of landscape, maybe setback, maybe building size, maximums, civic space requirements, things like that change between whether you're B1 urban or B1 suburban, but building design follows all of them.
I think anybody put any thought into the timing that we're in today? Because if you go look at like our office building down there at Dalton 65, we're 99% leased, we're about 50% occupied. And as I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of shopping, you go look at a big shopping center with big holes in them, it's gonna be a while for these things to fill up at all. I think you're probably looking at next few years, a lot of repurposing of buildings, tremendous amount of repurposing of those. Every office that doesn't need a lease office isn't gonna come back. And so you're gonna have to, these offices, these shopping centers will have to be able to try to repurpose them, but if they have to spend, if they have to spend this extra money and redesign the property to bring it up to this new code, it's just gonna make the rebound so much harder. I mean, there's no way with the rent structures in Mobile that you'll be able to bring, because you're gonna be lowering your rents, trying to fill these things back up because the demand is falling off. So, you're looking at, we're going from bad to worse in terms of where we are now. Well, 5 years from now, they might not be a problem, but right now.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that was, COVID wasn't even in their head.
But it's in there now.
No, I know. When they dropped, version 3, it was, I got my copy the day, like that Friday, March the 13th, and I think that weekend, everything went to hell and classes were canceled the next Monday, and they didn't even start the comment period on time because it was so weird. But, to Mike's point, you're going to have, you're not going to have a whole lot of non-conforming uses, that come out of this, because the uses generally, like I said, are the same. The zoning district's not changing for your property, but you are going to have some non-conforming structures and some non-conforming sites where your building doesn't match the architectural feature requirements, or your site doesn't have the landscaping and whatever that it may need. And in response to comments we made earlier, they've created some safe harbors for those things. So to Mike's point, if you've got a shopping center and you've got to convert some uses around to find a willing tenant to come in, as long as you don't increase the square footage of the building about 50% or more, you don't have to bring the building into compliance with the new building design standards. As long as you don't increase the developed area of the site by 50% or more, you don't have to come into compliance on site. So again, this is where you might have some advantage with your existing inventory and your existing built up inventory where you're non-conforming, but you're okay to do a lot of tenant modifications and tenant improvements and rebranding and awnings and you know, things that a tenant might want or need to identify their business and to make it usable, you're supposed to be able to do those things pretty freely without having to say, well, now we've got to rip up part of our parking lot and put gravel down or alternative surface or change the landscaping or add this architectural feature as some stick-on to the building. You're not gonna have to do those things unless you really go in and, you know, increase the size by 50% or clear out a lot of the vacant unused part of the site to expand, you know, the operation by 50% or more. So, you know, it's gonna make it harder for some things that do come online, totally new construction. They're gonna be built to a higher standard. It's gonna be more expensive to build. It's gonna be harder to get approved if it needs any approval. So they're gonna need more rent, and they're gonna have to compete with existing things that, you know, came in at a lower price point. And so the way I see it kind of living out, Mike, is you're probably gonna be okay for that shopping center. But what you're not going to see is new business coming in that needs a new structure. You know, where they say, well, we need somebody to build it and rent it to us, but we only want to pay blank a foot because that's the going rate in town. And say, well, if we're going to build new, it's going to have to be blank plus 3 a foot or whatever. And, you know, under the earlier versions of this, we were looking at having those increased costs, those increased design standards, but you could get more density, you could get more use out of the property. You had a bigger suite of uses, and you could try to make your investment back, you know, through having more occupancy. And that's not so much the case now. The design standards have gone down. It's not as strict as it was in the earlier versions, this version 4. So you're not going to have to spend quite as much to build new, but you don't exactly get a whole lot of new mixed-use developments and increased density and things like that the earlier form-based code was hitting to.
Cameron, does the association, is there a definitive push from the association about sending in letters or objections from the association as a whole to this deal? We got.
No, we have Casey there to kind of look out for us and give us these updates. But as a whole, we're not really holding any type of stance. It's really just for individual.
And that's kind of how things have operated is, you know.
So Casey, excuse me for interrupting you, what you're looking at here, in your opinion, is there anything so onerous in this that the association needs to take a hard stand against to say, this part we cannot do and should not do?
It's, you know, it's hard to come up with must-haves and would like to haves, you know, separate them out.
I mean, obviously, rezoning every piece of property in the city, that's a no. You know, that's hard. That's a hard no.
But that's not on the table.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I mean, that was the easy hard no. But as it says today, is there a hard no in there that we need to concentrate on as a group and individually to make sure it doesn't happen?
I think one thing, you know, would, and it won't sound like much, but I'm answering in the vein of what's accomplishable too, you know, at this point, given where we are. On rezonings, PUD modifications, because you're going to have your existing PUDs. You're not going to get a whole lot of new ones, but you've got your existing ones that every now and then need to be modified because they're site plan specific. And your conditional uses, you know, and all these special exceptions, variances, all these things. The new code goes into great detail to explain what the approval criteria for those things are. And, you know, will not harm any adjacent property owner, neighbor or community, shall not harm anybody. If the use would not have harmed them, it would have been allowed by right. And I'm not
Somebody has to
saying,
define harm too.
well, but I'm saying, the people that show up in opposition will define the harm, and if the approval criteria is you can't approve it if it's gonna harm somebody. Maybe
We
it's,
also need to talk about what we have accomplished. So,
Oh,
let me
I'm
ask you
all
this.
good on that, Kevin, I'm just,
right, well,
Where
when
we're
all
going
this
from
came
today.
out about rezoning everything,
yeah. I
we
understand.
all got together, hired him, lost it, had meetings with the mayor, said, no, no, no.
I understand what we've accomplished to date, but
Right.
now we're down to, we
yeah,
got this and it's, we're going here.
and I was just gonna finish the thing. I understand you should consider the harm when you're putting in one of these uses, it's not allowed by right. But there's no consideration for what the inherent benefits are or the need for the thing. And I think that's something that we could get in here that would help arm y'all collectively later with, of course, the neighbor doesn't want whatever, this substation next to their property. They're gonna talk about how it may harm them. I mean, we need power down there. We need affordable housing. We need these other things that a lot of this not in my backyard movement will be able to show up and rally and articulate some perceived harm. And if all these bodies can consider per the code are the negatives, not the reason behind it or the need for it or the benefits as a community for this thing, it's gonna leave you without a whole lot of punches to throw when you get into that meeting. You have to prove they're not harmed. That's all you can try to do, and it's gonna be hard to do.
Well, Casey, can we then ask you now to suggest that, the language be modified to include the possibility of balancing off overall community benefit against some individual harm, that we could request that you do that now?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, that's the kind of thing that I think is broad, it's general, it cuts across all the different disciplines.
I mean, I was just thinking of,
Yeah.
PUD, Pembroke is a PUD. Let's say we want to put in something that might irritate the neighbors a little bit, but which is of great benefit to the community as a whole. If they can't consider that, we're dead. So,
If
can
all
I
you,
ask you to put that in the form of a suggestion?
and yeah, I mean, and I'm happy to do anything, I mean, y'all know me, I want it to be workable, I want it to, because if it works for y'all, it works, I think, for the city, and I want to make it easier to administer, but there's some things that I don't think are realistic changes, but that is one that I think it's hard to argue against it, it's hard to
I'll
say.
give you an
like,
example, the motels that are over there on the I-65. Converting the motel into assisted living facilities is, to me, a very logical kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's a different zoning, and is being objected to by a neighbor right now. It's a law firm that, I mean, what, the old folks staying in there are gonna make a lot of noise singing hymns? I mean, it's nothing. But, there should be some community benefit, because motels are dying out there with no revenue, and converting them makes good sense to me.
There's a revenue, it's just not being captured by the owners.
Well, they came for a variance and it should have been rezoned.
Yes.
Is the requirement,
Is that Mino?
You're right.
Mino?
Yeah, I think, right there by.
Yeah.
some lawyers.
Yeah.
I don't remember what you said, but is the requirement for a neighborhood meeting still in there if you want to rezone?
It is.
Now, what are they gonna require of the applicant as far as, do they have to provide a facility for a meeting, or what kind of cost is gonna be involved in that? I don't know why, I mean, to me, that's just, man, I hate the thought of a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah, there's a requirement for neighborhood meeting, you've got one of the
Changes
changes,
the street, or where you gotta do it.
you've got to, It's gotta be accessible, it's gotta be reasonable, they don't really go into detail of how close it's gotta be.
You're gonna have to rent a room somewhere in a motel or a meeting room to have one of these meetings, probably.
ADA compliant and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, one of the things that we were able to change along the way is they had it to where you had to have your neighborhood meeting before you applied to the planning
That's the whole
commission.
point of the zoning commission meeting.
And we now have it, in response to our request, it's, if you're gonna have this meeting requirement, at least let us apply to the planning commission, get on an agenda, get the ball rolling, and just get the meeting done before the, planning commission meeting. But yeah, the neighborhood meeting requirement is not going away. The neighborhood associations, I think, generally are disappointed with this code. They don't think it goes far enough. They want more control. And, I think if you tried to go back to eliminate the neighborhood meeting requirement, you wouldn't be able to.
And is that for, that doesn't apply to a rezoning, does it?
Oh, it does.
I thought-
Well, I'll say this, it applies to rezonings that increase the,
It doesn't apply to everything.
no, it doesn't apply to everything.
Yeah.
If you're down zoning, and like to your example, the motel on the interstate, it's B3 right now. They need to go down to be able to put a nursing home facility in. They need to rezone it down. Assisted living. But in the way the code reads, they need a down zoning to do that. They would not need to have a neighborhood meeting to down zone. But under the new code, they can have assisted living in a B3. And so they're waiting to see if the code changes to be able to do what they want to do by right in their existing B3 district instead of coming in for a rezoning and down zoning right on the eve of this change. But yeah, but if you had to go to a rezoning to convert a motel to an assisted living facility, you would have to prove no harm, but you wouldn't get to talk about all the benefit or all the demand or all the need or all the whatever,
So that needs to change.
Well, to answer the question, what could be accomplished that I think would have broad appeal and that I think is, better for the healthy ordinance is don't just consider the negatives when somebody's coming up there, because if these things didn't have negatives, they wouldn't be prohibited or they'd be allowed by right, but it's things,
How do we get that into the dialogue or into the?
You need to submit your comment.
You submit a comment on the Maximobile portal.
I mean, Casey's gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, but it helps if you do it too,
They'll get my name on a list and I'll be.
It's already on, Bill, it's already on.
I would say, Bill, you made that list really a long time ago.
I mean, that's, but I'm of the mindset that this is happening. And I know, doesn't like that, but I just think that we need to nibble around the edges and try to, there's no way you can contemplate any future development and every way it's gonna be affected by this, but you know what you do every day, like your PUD, if you go to add a dumpster now, all of a sudden you got this neighborhood meeting and somebody's harmed and then you don't get it, So we need to improve what's there. It's my problem.
But it's hard to get your arms around what would have universal support, from a group like this or any group. I mean, it's easier.
Use some general language like, the enactment of an additional condition or requirement with regard to a particular property should take into consideration, harm to adjoining property owners and benefit to, other use. I'll give you one quick example. We were required to fill dumpster surrounds around all the dumpsters. Well, that's really good in one sense, but you know what it does? It provides a wonderful haven for homeless people to hide back there so that they can flash the girls coming out taking the garbage out after work. And we've had that problem. We've had them, I don't want to get into great graphic detail. Lots of things go on in those areas behind the dumpster shredder. Lots of things. And, I mean, we were required to put them, and look at the harm that's being created. And people who are hiding from the law got a great place to hide.
I parked next to one. Yeah, it's, you know, there's some big things and there's some little things like that. I think another thing is, and this is really hard to figure out how to approach right now, are signs. Signs are addressed in the code. Just assume it's getting worse for the sign making companies of the world, you know, and for your tenants that require a lot of signage, you know, but I've been told that staff didn't spend a whole lot of time working on signs because they anticipate signs kind of getting special treatment at the city council level. So I think that's an issue that might be more of a moving target, and we're gonna have to continue to monitor what that is. But again, it's, you know, there's some things that clearly got singled out for, you know, to be reduced under this code. Parking is one of them, especially downtown parking. You know, there's a good war on parking, and but that started years ago. And I think signs are another thing. And it's all in the spirit of having more walkability, less whatever, more appeal and aesthetics, which again, there's certainly a benefit to having that in a lot of places. It's not something that really carries over and translates to some other parts of town as well, where it's more industrial or it's less, you know, important for those things. You know, but I think you'll see, you know, some things do fine under the new code. You know, other things will be moving out to the county and to Saraland and other areas because they just, you know, for new construction, they just can't build, you know, what they want here. But we've got some time. I mean, February 25 is a date to submit comments before the planning commission, but that doesn't end of the story. You know, at some point it'll go to city council. They may or may not interact with the same portal for comments. But I've been in communication with, you know, everybody that will communicate with me at the city about what's going on. And, you know, I'm happy to convey thoughts, you know, and requests, and say this is on behalf of Youngblood Realty, or this is on behalf of Mobile Area Association of Realtors. You know, I need authority to do it, obviously. It's frankly, it's easier, you know. One of my clients is Alabama Power. They have very specific issues. They have very different issues than everybody else, pretty much. You know, it's easy to kind of come up, read the code with that one entity in mind and figure out what's wrong with it or what we want changed. Could, you know, come up with a memo and here it is. They're not looking at it from what's good from a commercial realtor standpoint, you know, or from a residential developer standpoint. But they have what's interesting to them, you know, and it almost works better that way. If everybody thinks about what's important to you, you know, can we do this? Even if you don't know if the answer is no or yes, just ask me, hey, can we do this here? Can we do that there? And if I say not under this, you say, well, that's not right. I want to say something. You can post it. You can ask me to post it. You know, you can write a letter. I don't think the mayor wants to sit down and have 100 meetings. I don't think he wants to have one meeting with us, you know, to go line by line on this. I think he's trusting that the staff responded to the comments, and the staff's got it to version 4, and it's going to the planning commission. And at that point, it drops off staff's hands. I think it'll become kind of a live, torpedo in the water, and there'll be some hands on it at the planning commission level. There'll be some hands on it before city council, and there'll be some hands on it at the city council level. And, you know, you're pretty far removed from Mark White, you know, the staff, you know, on a lot of that, I think, at that point. Anything else? Now that I've cheered up everybody's Thursday?
You lost half the crowd with all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if people could vote with their feet, I think I got voted out.
Well, just thank you for coming.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
I didn't ask, but any questions anybody have from the peanut gallery?
We didn't have anybody jump on.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Bill asked if